So tonight we have a panel discussion, and we have got 4 talented designers here to share their experiences with their UX design tools of choice. We have a couple of Paycor people with us tonight. My colleagues Sam and Amy, and Sam is going to be sharing on Axure, and Amy is going to be sharing on Sketch. And then we also have Alasha, who is from Kroger. She's a product designer there. She's going to be covering Invision for us. And then Andrew from 8451 is going to be talking about Figma. So we've got a really great variety of tools. Really excited to hear about their experience with each. And I am just going to go ahead and pass things over to our first presenter up, and that's Amy Street.
Awesome. Cool. So I'll share my screen and go to the other sketch file. All right. So funny enough, my presentation is in Sketch. So I love the tool, and I'll tell you more about it. So how qualified am I to talk about this? Depends. I've been using Sketch for the last 3 years. So that feels like maybe a big name, maybe a big number, maybe a small number. Sketch frequently has updates. So as I'm in the tool multiple times a day, all day for work, and even some personal projects, I catch most of those, but there are some nuances to those updates that I'm sure some fellow sketch lovers in this call know about that I am not going to bring up. So I look forward to discussing more in the Q&A after. So I use Sketch to brainstorm. I use it for high fidelity mocks. I use it when I'm communicating with marketing people, developers, anything in between. And I love that because I can think in any direction. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can think up and down and left and right. It's amazing. So I feel super thinking outside the box with Sketch. So with Sketch, the limitation is you do have to have a Mac to enjoy Sketch. I know other tools don't have that limitation, but I believe that the benefit of having a Mac for Sketch and that is because there's all of the trackpad moving and zooming in and out, and the ability of the trackpad really makes Sketch and Mac a good pair together. You can sign up for a 30-day free trial. If you decide you love it, $99 a year. Feels like a pretty good deal. So I'm all about it for sure. So let me move all of the Zoom videos out of the way. All right, so just a quick lay of the land. Sketch, there's a lot of tools on the top, and the left, and the right. So the top we'll talk a little bit more about when I'm talking about symbols in a bit. On the left side, there's pages where right now I only have one page and then a symbols page. But if you're thinking about a high level project, you could organize that within one sketch file where you're talking about the home page and then maybe a specific customer journey here and the flow of those pages. So it can get super intricate as much as you need. I've tried doing files where I have all of my artboards on the same page, and that gets a little chaotic. So it makes it more searchable as you divide it up within pages. On each page, there are artboards, and you can name them, or if you don't, then they just go artboard 1, artboard 2, and so on. So, but what's great about naming it is if I want to search and I'm looking for maybe where I'm talking about Invision briefly, I can spell it right and I can find it, and then I will see where it is. It's on the plugins artboard, and I can go find that. So it's very discoverable once you get it more robust. Obviously, this one file is not that detailed, but if you have 100 times bigger than this, it really is helpful to have that search. So then on the right side, we'll talk more about that, but resizing is a very powerful tool in Sketch, and the layout of that, the appearance and the text styles, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. but then just detailed in the specific things that you need on the element that you've selected. So if you've selected text, you get, I'll show you. If you select text, you get text details about it and the colors and all the information around that. If you select, here I have a grouped element, so that's text with a rectangle. There are limitations right there because I'm not focusing specifically on text. So you are shown the things that are related to the element that you're selecting. If you have, for example, like, let me do a screenshot right here. So because now I have a screenshot and it's called a bitmap, then you can see, oh, I can put a border on that, or I can put a shadow. There's, depending on what element you have selected, those things change. So that's helpful to realize. As well as when you have, I'll insert a random symbol really quick. See how there's this thing called overrides. If you're selecting a symbol, then when you're playing with the overrides, those are available on this right side too. So the left side's more general, the right side gives you more details to affect your page. So one powerful thing about Sketch is this smart distribute. When you know that it exists, it's not scary and annoying, but when it's very new, I didn't like it at first. So when you're selecting elements and see how there's extra lines that have shown up between the elements and dots when I'm focusing on the middle of the element, those, instead of me assuming I can move the whole group like I'm doing there, if I click in the middle of it, a Mickey Mouse hand will show up and I'm moving the items within the group. So, and if I do the lines between them, I can change the spacing. So it's extremely powerful when you're expecting to do that action, but when you're trying to drag it, but you accidentally are clicking some sort of smart distribute functionality, that can be frustrating. So as long as you're aware of it, it really does, it's awesome. So I won't talk. The only thing about smart distribute is if you have something that's not perfectly aligned with each other, you see the spacing between them are fine, but if the spacing changes here, it won't give you that. So that's something to note about smart distribute and when it's expecting you to ask to smart distribute. So one of the most beloved things of Sketch are the symbols. And I'll share out this link later, but, or however Amy will share out these things. But there's links to what symbols mean, how to create them and all of that, but I'll show how to do that. So there are text symbols, there are layer symbols, there are complex symbols. So if I am typing, I type something and then I want to change the color. Maybe I want to change the type of it. So I decide this is a font that I want to use often, like I want to reuse this. I would go into the appearance on the right side and create a text style. So bold, blue text. So if I wanted to type something else, and maybe I was using some other fonts, I guess I could really show it here. Well, so right now I'm using a paragraph. If I wanted to change that, I would go to the bold blue text. And now look, without any sort of me having to go change multiple things about it, it is now using that same text style. So it's very good for reusable once you've decided, here's what I want the style to be. Awesome. For colors, same thing. So you find the color and you're like, oh, this red's fabulous. So you take it and then you would make a layer style. And I'll say fabulous red. So if I want another rectangle, maybe this size rectangle, whatever, I can go to fabulous red and now I have it. So as you can see, I'm choosing ones that are local to this document. They're With libraries, which I'll talk about in a little bit, we have the colors and we have the style guide library that I have connected. So other color libraries I've connected, and I can use this orange 300 that I've chosen. So it's extremely powerful with the library. And now I will talk about, as you can see in this top left corner, there's this 4. If I click on symbols, I would see those local symbols like that button that I'd previously played around with, but because that's not a local symbol and that's in a different library, I'm not seeing that here today. With text, I made that the bold blue text, so it's showing up. Layers, the fabulous red showing up, and then colors, which colors are saved down here when you create a color variable. And I'm not going to do that just to save time, but you would do the same thing, create a color variable and name it such and such. So for more complex symbols, I'll play around with maybe banner. So here's a default banner that I've built, and I'll show you more about that. There's an icon that I've made. It's configurable to change the text. Hey there. If I don't want it closable, I can turn the symbol off. Turn the symbol off. So based on what I want controlled, I can hide and show these within the symbol itself. So if I go to the library where it's built, here there's layout where I'm having it grow vertically. If the message is long enough and I want it to grow taller, then I would put it vertical. If I wanted for some reason it to be horizontal, then like if the icon disappeared, then it would grow horizontal. I've hidden certain things. I didn't want the text style to change on here, so I've unchecked that override. So you can kind of lock down what you want with those. And with the, so I'll just do a quick bird's eye view of this. If you zoom out, there's a lot of symbols going on, and some of those symbols have a lot that are happening in them. So a lot of my symbols have this option drop down, and I didn't want to clutter things, so I used this delta symbol to hide them under their respective things, so I don't have a border just sitting around amongst higher level things like buttons and form elements and all of that. So symbols allow you to hide some of that clutter, so it's available in overrides, but not in the way of choosing symbols. Cool. Oh, yes, one more thing. Wait, yeah, okay, sorry. So one thing, if you go to preferences, here is where the libraries, so the symbols that are not your document symbols, this is how you import that. So it's a separate sketch file, and you just add library, find it in your files, and then it's connected there. So that keeps it organized and able to be used in multiple documents than just the one that you're in. If a global library has been updated, in the top right corner, there will be a message about that, and you can verify what's being updated there. So second greatest thing to me about Sketch is the plugins. There's so many plugins. If Sketch can't do it, there's a plugin that can. So personally, I've benefited from plugins. One's called Rename It. So I'll show you in this banner. If for some reason, I received word that we can't call it banner, we want to call it notification. So I've selected all of these artboards that are containing these. I'm going to plugins, rename it. I'm going to find and replace the names. So rename it allows me to, I'll find the word banner. Why does it say text? Oh, I have to highlight the whole thing because I highlighted not the whole artboard. See the left side, I've got tiny elements, but I want to highlight the big groups of those. So now I'm going to go here. Banner. So now you see /default, /info, success, all of that. So notification. Sure. So now it's notification default, notification info. So now I've renamed that and all of my layers have renamed. And within my document, because I am now in the style guide library, it is referring to it as document symbols rather than a style guide library symbol. So now it is no longer banner, it's called notification. So that has saved me some time in organizing things. And then, hey, Amy, if I'm going over, just holler at me. I'm not checking the chat, sorry.
You're fine. You've got about half a minute left.
Okay, so that's awesome. I'll zoom forward. Oh, that went so fast. So plugins that have helped me collaborate is I can export artboards to Miro and add lines to connect and build out the flow and chat and collaborate. Zeppelin has helped with developer spec handoff, and Invision has helped with going through the flow because I can build out those click points. Sketch itself has things, they're coming up on those plugins. So they have a Sketch Cloud available, which is better than Zeppelin in my opinion, but just because it's connected to Sketch. But my developers are used to Zeppelin, so I'm not gonna rock that boat at all, but it has the same things with all of the specs. And then Sketch Cloud, I can click in the top right corner to export, and Zeppelin, I just do export selected. So it's not any harder, it's just however you want to play the game. Sketch prototype, I don't like anymore. You can prototype within Sketch, but I find that it clutters the artboards that I'm working on and I can't draw hotspots. So that's why I personally prefer Invision. And then the grand finale, my favorite part of Sketch. Most people probably don't care about this, but I do. When you go and do the eyedropper for a color, you can click outside of Sketch to get that color. And I think that is fantastic. And that's all I've got.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. And before we hand things over to Andrew, I just want to mention that I'm looking for the settings inside of Zoom. I've got the master setting set to show the live captioning. Just curious if anybody knows on like the admin side in the meeting if there's potentially like an option that needs to be checked as well. I don't know if anybody has experience with turning that on.
Amy, I can always look at my art group account that I have and see what the settings are. If you drop your email in there, I'll take screenshots.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm really sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I appreciate your attention.
Great, thank you. Just plug my email into the chat. Okay, so next up we have Andrew, and he is going to be focusing on Figma for us.
Yes, I am. Can you see my screen up here? Perfect. Yes. I think I saw some head nods there, which is great. So awesome. Anyway, let me expand this and make this go full screen here. So hi, everyone. I'm Andrew. I am an experience designer at 8451. I've spent the last 4 years or so designing an analytics product for Kroger. It pulls data from like 60 million households, and then we kind of transform that data for our customers. So basically, we're just dealing with data consistently. And in that time, we've shifted between a few different design tools, but for over 1.5 years now, we've really fallen in love with Figma, like wholeheartedly. And I can't wait to share some of my favorite features. Hold on, I'm just going to time this so I don't lose track of time. You know, and I can't wait to share some of these features with you all. But before I get started, the one thing I did want to point out is actually like this entire presentation is designed in Figma, prototyped in Figma, and we're viewing it in Figma. So even the logo on the right side of the screen was actually designed in Figma. So it's pretty, it's a little meta right now, I guess you could say, but let's just jump right into it. So as far as it goes, there's a few key features that I want to touch on today that are like really instrumental in how we design at 8451. We really couldn't survive without them, and I'll go into more detail on these in just a minute. And then following that, I'm going to do a really quick demo and just kind of dive in on how we leverage components from our actual design system in order to build robust screens and prototypes. So one of the first features that really drew us to Figma was its multiplayer aspect. So you can collaborate really effectively with other team members in real time, but also asynchronously. And what I love about this is like through commenting through other features along those lines, it's a really great way to track feedback where someone can see the full spectrum of context, or they can just get a little snippet or sliver if they want to. So basically, instead of sending static files back and forth, like our design process has become more dynamic, consistent, and real time. And the really cool part about this is like, as you're seeing in this little animation here to the right, you can work with developers, copywriters, you know, like content folks, product managers, and like you just get this continuity, which is really awesome. The second piece that I wanted to kind of bring up here was in terms of efficiently speeding up our design process. We've been able to work on a lot of the same components at the same time. So the fact that we can be in the same file, working on the same stuff at the same time, it's like, even if you have one more designer or one more person, you're able to just like work that much quicker and get to a solution that much quicker. And, you know, we're also able to control some permissions and things like that in case we don't want our developers making changes to a design. I'm only joking, because the irony in that joke is there's actually an inspect feature that's built into Figma that gives developers access to various style names, content, and properties, which is really, really helpful when you have a design system, especially in terms of maintaining that consistency with what we have in code versus what we have in our design tool in Figma. Kind of another thing that I did want to touch on is in terms of the auto layout experience. And so Amy kind of touched on something similar in Sketch. And so in Figma, what we call that is auto layout. And so really what it is there are basically dynamic frames. And so the frames, think about them as like these super powered artboards. They've got built-in padding, they've got built-in spacing, they've got other constraints that you can control. And with the examples that I have on the right side of the screen right here, they're actually all using auto layout to kind of help define that space. So you'll notice that in the buttons, like the length of the text kind of determines how that wrapping container is sort of what those spacing constraints are. And then you can see with that motion down there that's happening with that little card, it's actually like adapting as it's adjusting. And that's actually using auto layout and then a little nifty feature that I love there. So it just really helps keep that consistency that I was just talking about in terms of, especially when we're transitioning designs from us to the developers, but also like in terms of our collaboration. So the second piece here is you can actually nest auto layout frames infinitely. So the kind of crazy thing is, especially with this card that we're looking at on the right side of the screen, it's kind of expanding and collapsing, but there's all these pieces within it that are actually making up the card. And each of those can be their own specific auto layout. And so it can all be sort of nested inside of each other. And then as the card shrinks, it adapts to the bounding container. And that what's really helpful about this is when we talk about designing, you know, with responsive design in mind in terms of different screen sizes and resolutions. And so it's really beneficial in that regard. The third point that I wanted to bring up here is it really makes combining complex lists of things super quick. And so it's really helpful when it comes to, we have a lot of like tables and stuff in our products. You can go so far as to have, you know, a list of content and then move things up and down that list very effortlessly. And so I just love that you can kind of adjust things really quick on the fly when it is in this auto layout group and you have the consistent spacing constraints that are set up. And then the last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on here is there's actually multiple ways to achieve the same thing. So like the stuff that I've kind of created on the right side of this screen, there's so many different ways to approach this. There's a lot of different permutations. And with that said, like it does take a little bit of practice to get things right in terms of some of those constraints and those different paddings and spacings. I won't deny that, but the trade-off that you get is, it just gets you thinking as a designer more in terms of percentages and spacing that mirror Flexbox layouts that our developers deal with day in and day out. So I really love that it, again, we're creating that continuity, especially like that's really imperative in our space with our developers. The last thing that I'll touch on here before I'll jump into the demo is actually components. And so you can actually have like that auto layout feature that I just talked about and build that into components. But components are really awesome because for us, especially like having a really robust design system and a great team working on that at 8451, it just allows us to really democratize design. So everyone has the same context in terms of the system and the knowledge and like how it helps drive design decisions. So when we talk about these components, they're not limiting us necessarily as they are freeing, because when you need to build complex components that are made up of other components, I guess, basically what we do is, we grab a button or we grab a switch or we grab a form field. And when we grab all of those components from our system, we just want those to be consistent. And then therefore, in the sort of overarching component that they might make up, like a modal or something like that, you have that consistency and you don't have to think about those sorts of problems, and you can focus on the bigger picture. The second point that I'll bring up here is they actually enable really good consistency across different products. So we have two primary products at 8451. They're on very different ends of the spectrum. One's on analytics and one's on the activation side, but they should still feel like a family. So the design system and these components really help drive that. There might be differences in like how we implement those across the different products and how we tell that story. But again, that word of that consistency rings true, when we're leveraging instances to build something bigger. And, when we have those instances where you're forming a new pattern or something like that with a mix of components combined, that's when we have a discussion with other, team members, designers, just to get input on it so we can start to create guidelines down the line. One of the cooler features that was actually released is this thing called variants in Figma. So in essence, these are basically states that are managed inside a component. So this could be like a hover state, a focus state, click states. In the examples to the right, you'll notice this switch up here in the top right. And so imagine that it's got the off state and an on state. And that's that circle that's kind of sliding back and forth between them. But basically, what you're seeing is those are each a variant, and I'm just transitioning between the two. So you just like it's a really cool feature that they have now in Figma called interactive components, where I just include an instance of that. In this case, I've got that switch or even the form field or even that hamburger menu, which I don't love those, but and I've got I've got all those animating, and they're doing it automatically, and that's an instance of a component. So it's really cool and flexible when it talks about that motion flowing through to design. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about here really quick, again, going back to that conversation around developers, and they really allow us to create great mappings between what our developers see in code. And so what this means here is basically they can help steward this can help steward the process along, because the styles and such that we have in our components in Figma are actually named quite similar to what we have in our design system. So that way, when developers are sort of compiling screens alongside designers, we can have that continuity there. Now, the one thing is that these components and like Figma should never take the place of a conversation, but it can really help steward the process along, especially asynchronously. So I know, let me just check what I'm at here with timing. Okay, so I've got 5 minutes left. This is perfect. So what I'm going to actually do is actually jump in and give a really quick on-the-fly demo of how we use Figma and how we might use Figma at 8451. So give me a second. Let me just jump into the file. And also, one thing I wanted to point out, the crazy thing to me is everything you just saw is actually only driven off of 8 or 9 slides. So it's really cool to be able to keep that pretty simple. So I live in Albuquerque now. I don't live in Cincinnati anymore. I miss it dearly. I love Albuquerque. The irony in this card here is I don't really have a lawn. It's like actually like volcanic rock. Anyway, so basically, actually, you know what? Hold on, one last thing here, and let me just see if I can back out of this for 1 second. The only thing that I do want to do is actually turn on keystrokes, just so you guys can see what shortcuts and stuff I'm using. I always forget. There we go. All right, so we'll see if this works here. Basically, so the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to actually drag this to the middle so you can kind of see, but so I'm going to actually draw a frame. So I'm hitting the F key and I'm trying to get it to just be, you know, roughly the same size of this little card that we've got here. Now, the cool thing is I'm just going to type this text in here and I'll say lawn mowing ink. And then we're going to create this Albuquerque text down here as well. If I can spell it, such a hard word to spell on the fly. But anyway, so what I'm going to actually do here is actually pull from text styles that we have in our design system. So the nice part is this medium looks pretty close to this, so we'll go with that. And then with this text style here, I'm actually going to make that a little bit smaller just to try to distinguish a little bit of a hierarchy that looks close. And then using colors we have set in our system, I'm going to actually update that type. So there's a little bit of a hierarchy there. So you can see kind of that these two are similar. Now, the one thing that I will say is, again, this is the auto layout piece. I'm actually going to select these two items. And when I select them, I can actually group them. So I'm going to do Command G, and then I'm going to hit the auto layout button over here. And what that does is it kind of snaps them into this sort of predefined layout. So you can see I can change the direction to be below or next to that item. And I can actually define that spacing. So this is where the spacing constraints. I'm just going to set it to 0. For now, that's completely fine. So that's looking pretty good. Now, let's focus on this second piece here, this 72,000. So we'll say 72,283. It's in this middle section. Looks like it's a little bit bigger. So I'm going to, again, go to our predefined type hierarchies that we have in our product. I'll go 500. That looks a little bit too big. So we'll drop it down to 400. You know, and then the other piece too that we'll see is there's this little badge over here that's showing this percentage of how I'm doing in my lawn mowing business, which is I do not have again. I'm going to drag this positive. And so what I did was actually there's this cool tab up here. So we have layers and assets. And these assets actually pull from our design library that we have, similar to the stuff that Amy just kind of pointed out. We have a team library set up with 197 components and styles. And so I'm pulling from that. And in searching for badge up here, I just simply drag and drop it in here. And now the one thing you'll say is like, okay, you know, so this here, if I click both of these and I actually group those together again, so I'm using the grouping feature quite a bit. If I auto layout those, you'll see that it kind of snaps to this left side and it sort of set up the spacing based on what I just had set up. Now, I actually want that to be horizontal, so I'll change the direction. I'm going to increase the spacing to 8. And then I'm actually going to use this little nifty icon over here to change the alignment. So I'm going to center those things. So there we go. That's looking pretty close there. But one thing that I didn't do actually is the 7.9%. And so this 7.9%, we're going to fill this in here. And if you'll notice, I'll zoom in a little bit since the contrast is not great. I'm sorry. The green on green contrast is good. The light green on white is not great. So I'll work on that for all you accessibility folks. But so if we say plus 7.9%, you can see that this was automatically adjusting to that. Now, the one thing that I'm going to do here really quick is actually auto layout these together. And so, like I said, I've got 2 auto layout components nested inside of another one. And I'm just going to set it to 24. I like using multiples of 8. I'll round this a little bit because, you know, why not? So that's looking pretty good. The only thing that I'm missing is actually these icons. So the last thing that I'm going to do to actually go those, and we have it called add, which is fine. So if you watch, I don't know if you saw that, but it actually snaps to it, which is really cool. And it shows up in that space. So I'm just going to add in these 3 icons. I don't condone, necessarily adding them in, you know, without the context and the labels, just in terms of, again, accessibility. But, you know, when I look at these 3 options here, you know, just for the sake of this demo, you know, I figure they suffice. So if I do the same thing that I just did, I'm going to select all 3 of these items and I'm going to actually group those. And then I'm actually going to auto layout it and I'm going to switch it to go horizontally. So you can see it's in the rough order that I want. And then one really cool thing is I can actually set it to fill the container. So it's actually going to fill the whole frame, taking into account this padding that's set on the outside of this, which I'm going to make more consistent. So you can see that those are there. Now to get them spaced out like I did, there's actually a really cool feature. So if they're packed, they're all on the left side with a spacing of 24. But what we can do is actually put space between, and that actually defines a custom preset space in there. I'm going to add a little padding on this here, and then I'm going to put this little gray background on it, which is fine. I'll round that a little bit as well. Then you'll notice there is a little bit of an increase of padding, kind of on the left and right, but I'll solve that in just a second. I have these little dividers here, and these are the last things that I will add into this. And so basically in adding those into this, they just kind of snap into that space, and so I can reorganize those freely. And so the last thing I'm going to do is actually increase this padding a little bit so that these match. And you'll notice that it did actually push its bounding container over a little bit. And then I can set some of these to fill the container as well. And basically what we've got then is we have a card that basically can kind of expand and collapse. Some of this isn't going to be as responsive, but we can make this text responsive. And this is, so if I fill the container, and what you'll see is if I were to kind of scale this thing up and down, that text is responding. It's not breaking in the best place. But anyway, that's my spiel on how to create a card and use components from our design system. I will stop sharing and I will toss it over to Alasha.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Yep.
So we've got Alasha up next. She's going to talk about Envision.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to share a few slides put together. So as Amy just said, I will be talking today about Envision. My name is Alasha. I'm a product designer at Kroger. Currently, I work on the front end savings accounts and loyalty teams on the website and app for our customers. So all those coupons, weekly ad, I work on that. So first we'll start off with what is it, which is always a good place to start. So in a nutshell, Invision is a prototyping, collaboration, and workflow platform. Envision products address a wide variety of product design needs, from discovery brainstorming, if you're into the Google sprints, and also all the way to final mock delivery to developers. Envision also integrates with a variety of tools, including Jira, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Sketch, Photoshop, and Dropbox. Today, I'll highlight kind of how it integrates with Sketch, since that's what program I primarily use as a designer at Kroger. And just a fun little side note, every Fortune 100 company, including Kroger, utilizes it to some degree. It is also available for personal use as well. So you would ask, what can I do with Envision? This is a lot of words, but this is just some details about the variety of products that Envision currently offers. So within the umbrella of Envision Cloud, they offer prototype, craft, specs, and freehand. Prototype, I believe, is what most everyone is familiar with. You can build prototypes of just varying fidelity for user testing, stakeholder sign-off, developer handoff, and more. Craft is a super powerful Sketch and Photoshop plugin that you can use to sync your designs to Envision prototypes. You can build prototypes in Sketch, Photoshop, connect it to their design system manager, and add data and images like JSON files to designs. Specs helps centralizes and connect designers, developers, and product managers in real time during design handoff. Freehand is a collaborative digital whiteboard that can be used for discovery sprints, retros, other agile ceremonies. If you use Miro or Mural, it's very similar to those products. They also offer Envision Studio. It's a screen design tool, very similar to, I would say, Sketch and Figma, where you can design, prototype, and animate all within the same space. And then they also have their Invision design system manager, and it helps designers and product teams create, maintain, distribute design systems and help keep everyone connected, but while handling stuff like version control and documentation. Let me go. We're gonna back up. So 3, how do I use Envision? In my daily work as a product designer, especially as a designer that kind of specializes in user interface design at Kroger, I primarily use Envision Craft and Prototype to create prototypes for user testing and mocks for developer handoff. So this is like typically what happens, but of course with everything there can be variance depending on project scope and timing. So generally the first step is after a user test is written and approved by a research team, typically done by one of my UX partners, I create screens for each task and any additional images needed in Sketch. After those screens have been completed, we take a look with the team and everyone at those screens to make sure they fit everything. I sync those I upload the screens needed for the test to an Invision prototype using the Craft Sketch plugin. Then from there, I go to the prototype platform. I like to do it on the browser. I add hotspots, headers, footers, transitions, whatever I'm going to need to kind of ensure that the prototype flows properly and smoothly for user testing. We try to make it as seamless as possible, even though we do caution people in user testing that it's like just a prototype, so things don't always work like if you were on the actual app or website. Once we've got our user testing completed and we've kind of analyzed those results and I have like clear UI takeaways, I apply it to the mocks in Sketch. And then from there, once the mocks are in a good spot, I create separate projects for iOS, Android, and web. And then I upload final design mocks for developers to view and inspect with Envision. And then I also will add these URLs, like the Envision URLs and any assets to their JIRA tickets for each different task. I'll pause there and switch to my Sketch file so I can share kind of in real time how it all works. So what I've got here are just some pages from our mobile app in Sketch. So what I want to do is create a project that contains these screens and Envision to put together like a prototype. Let's say we're going to test this flow. So what I do is I select all my artboards that I need uploaded to the project. Over here on this panel, all these icons are all the different Envision or like Craft plugin things. I'm not going to click on them because then everything gets kind of jumbled up. But they have like the prototype. This is for the design system manager. The Craft data was what I was talking about with the JSON files. And the freehand stock is like for images. But in this case, I want to do sync. So I tap that. And since it knows that these screens haven't been previously uploaded to another project I have, so it prompts me to create a new prototype. And then it titles it whatever I have titled for the Sketch file. So this is interaction design Envision demo. That's fine. So from there, you select what device you want to put your prototype in. These are iOS screens, so I always do iPhone. They have documentation about if you're like confused as to what size to use, they have documentation on what sizes their containers are. I think their iPhone one is the iPhone 8 size where it's like 375 by 669 or something like that, 667. So for this case, I'll use iPhone. You have other options here like Artboard order, only publish artboards that have been modified, which is useful when you have a ton of artboards and you only want to add the ones that have been modified versus adding all of them. And then the pixel density is kind of like, I always do 2x because I want things to be sharp, but it's kind of like the retina thing. So everything looks good, so I'll publish. It takes a little bit, and it's loading here. Okay, so when it dings, it means it's ready. So I click the link open in web, and now here are my Invision screens based on what I had in Sketch. I don't have time, I don't think, to get into every like little piece of this, but if I want, I can share this project or invite people to the project. I'll invite she's out on maternity leave, so she won't see this, but my UX designer, I'll add her, save changes. So now she can look at, and because she has Invision privileges, she's added in the system, she can go in and comment and make changes as needed. So I'll also demo kind of like how to build the screens. So this view, the little eyeball, is showing me basically a preview of what someone like looking at this would see. If I want to add interactions, I go to build mode. And this is where like the fidelity really comes into play. It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. For user testing, I try to keep it somewhere in between where it's somewhat high fidelity, but also like it's a prototype that we need to get tested rapidly, hence rapid prototyping. So I don't get too in the weeds with things. But what I just did was I just added a fixed header and a fixed footer. And let's say I want this little cart guy to link to cart. It gives me these options of select a destination. So I'll pick cart. And then from there, you can also specify gestures. So if someone taps, double tap, swipe right, swipe left. For prototypes, we typically just do tap. And then you can also specify a transition. You can make these really fancy. They can dissolve, push right, push left, excuse me, slide right, slide left, flip, all this. For this demo, I'll do push left. And I'll save that. So another cool thing is people can come in and comment. So if someone comes in and we need to change this banner out, we could say swap banner with newest asset and send it. Now everyone that comes to this project, that's added to this project in Invision, can see this comment. And I can also mark it as resolved if I do go in and switch the banner. So that has been super helpful for if I need someone to review something like copy or something that I need an opinion on. Someone can go in and just comment their thoughts or let me know what needs to get updated or changed. Another really neat thing, as in caution, you need to use the craft plugin in order for this to work, but is the inspect. Basically for inspect, the developers can see pretty much everything that I see in Sketch. They see all my ugly like folder names on the side. And they also can see, I gotta move the same thing, what colors are being used on the page, what fonts are being used, and the layout, assets, all of that. So for example, I think this was kind of all images. So there's no live, but if you hover, it lets the developer know the height of things. These are all kind of funky because I think they're all images, but this is like super useful. This is what I pass to my developers so they could see this padding and sizing on everything. It saved me a ton of time because I used to have to like redline stuff, like type out all the spacing for these pages, which gets unwieldy when you're working on 3 teams with up to 6 different dev teams. So I recommend Inspect. And what I just did was tap on my hotspot to go to the page that I linked previously. And now I'm on the cart page. And I know you can make templates so that you don't have to do what I'm doing right now, where you have to like set every single header footer. But again, just for the demo, I'll demonstrate what I would do for that. And then maybe I want to link back to home. So I would do, and there's these other options too, where you could do another part on the screen. If you're doing like anchor links, link back or close, screen as overlay, external at URL. So there's a ton of options for where buttons actually take people. For this one, I'll do like a funky one, like pop. Cool. So if I go back to my preview, just did the transition I set. So that was like a super quick walkthrough of all the different things that Invision can do. So what are the pros and cons? There's, with everything, a ton. There's controversy. So personally for me, pros of Invision, to me, the interface is pretty beginner friendly, and if there's a ton of documentation to kind of help with troubleshooting. I can say personally, I used this for my senior capstone in college when I had no idea what I was doing with anything, and it worked really well for my capstone. So if I can learn it as a senior in college, anyone can learn it. I also like that it quickly can generate kind of like mid-fidelity prototypes, especially with that craft plugin. I don't need to go in and no code or mess with any type of animation software like After Effects, yikes, just to quickly show people what an interaction should look like and do. And Invision, I think, also provides like a comprehensive suite of products for almost every stage of sprint discovery. Invision used to primarily be like a Marvel app kind of thing, where it only had the prototyping tool, but it's really grown into like a huge, like a thing where Invision has like talks about just design in general, design ops. They also have like write books to help you, like not only with their software, but also just with design as a whole, and how they're really invested in like making sure like people are not only really good at using their software, but also just really good designers and product leaders in general, which I think is really cool. Some cons. The web and mobile apps can be like laggy and buggy because when you have prototypes that have like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 screens, it has to load all those screens to deliver the experience. So I've noticed, especially in like user testing, it can take a couple of minutes for the prototype to load for our users, which isn't always ideal because time is always of the essence when you're doing user testing, especially unmoderated. And especially this happens a lot on VPN, because I don't know what's going on, but VPN at Kroger kind of is in a love-hate relationship with Invision sometimes. Another con is you can't load mocks with different canvas sizes to the same project. They have to be uploaded to separate projects. This comes up sometimes when I'm trying to upload web and responsive mocks to the same project. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, and it looks really weird. Thankfully, the developers kind of understand like, okay, the screen is 320 or 375. It's not actually like 1440, but it would be nice. I would think Invision, if you're listening, to allow for multiple kind of screen sizes. And I'll also add everything that I've demoed is kind of through the enterprise license that we have at Kroger. If you don't have an enterprise license, I think like all plans, it kind of degrades from there. And they do have a free option, but if you are like trying to do more than like, I think it was like 3 prototypes of 3 projects, you're kind of like, it's not going to help you. So it can be kind of expensive to like pay for the additional the upgrades, if you will. So I think that concludes all I have to say on Invision. Like I said, I could really get into it because I'm in it. I deal with it all the time, all day, every day. But I've also included just some general links for about Invision, and if you're having trouble with it or want to learn more about it in these slides. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, I thought that was great. And I guess if you don't mind sharing your slides with me, I can also share those out afterwards along with the video link too.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. So last but not least, we have our final presenter, Sam, and she is going to talk about Axure.
Hello. All right. I guess I'm the dork today that used PowerPoint to put their presentation together. So apologies there, I guess. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be talking about Axure today. Axure is the tool that I primarily use in my job at Paycor. I'm using it for actually, honestly, is my main visual design workhorse lately. I do also use Sketch occasionally for specific things. And I use it for everything from rapid to high fidelity prototyping, as well as dev, handoff, and communication. So I'm kind of using the full spectrum of it. I would describe Axure as basically a full spectrum interaction design tool, sort of as opposed to more of like a UI or a graphic design tool. And I think you'll kind of see what I mean by that by the end of this. It comes with 2 components. So you have Axure RP, which is their desktop prototyping software. And then there's Axure Cloud, which is their cloud-based collaboration platform. I'll kind of talk about, you can actually use their collaboration platform without using their desktop application. So I'll kind of go through that first because it's kind of cool. So Axure Cloud is basically, first and foremost, it's a team repo of projects. So, you know, you upload projects, you create workspaces, you invite team members. Their freemium version is actually pretty cool. I don't think it actually has any limits on how many people you can add to a workspace. So that's kind of nice if you're looking for like an entry-level prototype sharing tool. This works pretty well. The other cool thing about it is that it has plugins for like Sketch, IxDA. You can also just upload images into it and build those sort of like hotspot click-through prototypes, very similar to Invision, where you can draw hotspots on it. You can link between pages. It has animations. You can set like the header and footer and all that stuff. And you can use those for like some, like the sort of basic prototypes that you can use for usability testing. And if you're using their plugin with IxDA or Sketch, you can also get their dev inspect stuff. So very similar to like a Zeppelin or what they have in Invision. And the really interesting thing, I didn't know this until like a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh, I need to put together a presentation for this. The amount of free projects that you can use in a workspace on their freemium version is like 1,000. So if you are just getting into UX or you need a tool that you can use without like a big enterprise license to get started doing this type of prototyping, Axure Cloud's actually a pretty decent option, which I did not know till like a couple days ago. So that's kind of fun. So, and then we get into RP. So RP is the workhorse of Axure. It is the prototyping tool. It is kind of had a reputation over the years for being sort of a beast to work with, but in my experience, especially with a lot of their latest updates, I personally find it to be a pretty easy tool to use. And it can kind of cover the whole gamut from, it has a lot of built-in like diagramming and wireframing libraries that you can use in like the early stages of a project to get stuff put together, get ideas out there. There's a lot of really cool like wireframing libraries that you can get for it too, like if you need to have like a custom one. And then it kind of goes all the way up into high fidelity visual design. It's gotten a weird rap over the years where it's like the hat kind of has a reputation for not, like, you can't produce good looking work with it. And I'm not entirely sure where that came from, because like I use both Sketch and Axure, and I've never really seen much of a meaningful difference in the quality of visual output that you can get from the tool. I think that impression may have just come from the fact that some older versions of Axure have like a very 1990s UI to it, but the visual design tools that you have within it are pretty on point. This is just a bunch of examples of stuff that was built fully with Axure. And then when you combine the two, when you combine Axure Cloud with Axure RP, you get some pretty robust team collaboration features. With that team project repository, you can have multiple designers, devs, PMs, whatever, looking at, working on, even changing the same files. They have a system for creating team files where elements of those files can be checked out and checked back in, where you then have like all your check-in notes, almost like a Git repo. And it maintains a version history that you can use to roll back changes or get a backup from an earlier version. It also, anything you publish to Axure Cloud from Axure RP backs up your project file, which has saved my ass multiple times. And it has a lot of really awesome tools for creating and maintaining design systems. So you can create centralized style libraries and interactive component libraries where, as you make changes to that library, you build out buttons, modals, form fields, whatever, that all have the behavior that you want. And as you change them, any project that uses them gets that change propagated through them. So you can maintain like a really consistent look and feel throughout all of your prototypes and designs without having to like have everybody install a lot of updates or anything. And the cool thing that I think is interesting is kind of similar to Figma. Like if you're building out components, like shared components within Axure, instead of like having to build out a symbol or like a static file for every state of a button, if it's got like a highlight or a click state or a hover or a validation state or whatever, you just build a button that has all those behaviors in it. So you have one button, and then when you drop it in a screen, it's just going to inherit that behavior. And that kind of brings me to like, I just breeze through like all of the main components of like most of these other tools that we just talked about, where it's like collaboration and hosting and prototyping and visual design. But the thing that kind of separates Axure, at least for me, in my experience, is when it comes to prototyping fidelity. When you're trying to get like a prototype out there, there's a lot of different stages of fidelity that you go through on a typical project, everything from like whiteboard, sketches and sticky notes to paper or basic wireframes. You get into sort of like some static images of screens. You might hotspot prototype some flows to do some concept testing. But then there's like a really big gap between I can click through effectively a slideshow of this thing and I have a coded product. And there's a lot of tools that will get you pretty far into a project where you need to see like how the interaction actually works. But Axure can get you like scary far on that journey. Because what Axure's output is not images or screens. It's an actual like web product. It is interaction. So if you're putting a button on a screen in Axure, it's a button. When you hit preview in your browser, it's going to behave like a button, and you can make it do all the things that a button does. And the biggest impact that has for me comes in with usability testing. The product that I work on at Paycor is a lot of the screens that we are, or the flows that we're designing, are data entry based. They are, it's an enterprise tool. It's not really like a like a web app, there's a lot of like data entry, data manipulation, highly repetitive tasks. And if I'm trying to prototype something like that in Invision, you know, I can kind of have someone click on a field and have it magically have text appear. And I can do some very short flows through things to see if something's understandable. And sometimes that's all you need. But with Axure, in a fairly similar amount of time, I can build a prototype that's going to let someone get in there, build something out, type things in, interact with things the way that they actually would with a coded product. You know, I can see if people take different approaches to something without having to anticipate what they are. I can watch them screw up and recover. I can give more open-ended or exploratory tasks in testing than I could if I was having to like hotspot prototype out a very specific flow. And ultimately, in testing a lot of this stuff in high stakes interactions where like you really have to get it right, I can observe a lot more realistic user behavior in the testing phase of a project than I could if I was just doing like hotspot prototyping. So this is where Axure tends to come through for me and makes it kind of my design tool of choice. I can give another example. This is a screen that I was working through some iterations of a few months ago, where it's a screen for somebody to enter in their hours that they've worked on different projects. And I did this through usertesting.com, so it's remote, unmoderated, so I don't have the opportunity to be there as a moderator to help someone suspend disbelief and use this like it's real. But I was able to prototype it to a level of fidelity that wasn't really necessary. So this whole test was one task. It's here's a week's worth of work data of stuff you worked on in the last week. Enter it in this time card, and then by the end, make sure it's correct because you're going to submit it to your manager. And I got to sit back and watch people and see what order they did something in, watch how they, you know, analyze whether it was correct or not. I watched people screw up and start over. But ultimately, I got to watch something that was fairly close to what an end user behavior would be. And this is the type of prototyping that really helps a lot because these screens are very dev expensive to build. So getting the interaction wrong before you commit dev time to it can be pretty expensive. So one thing about Axure that I think it has a reputation for is like this insanely like dreaded learning curve. Like it's the most complicated tool ever to use. I don't really agree with that. I think it's similar to Photoshop in the sense that, yeah, you could get in there and start doing like basic stuff very quickly and then never learn everything it does for the rest of your career because it can get pretty complex. You can get in and start doing basic prototypes, like even hotspot prototypes, forms, conditional logic really quickly. But once you start getting into things like mock databases with repeaters and writing expressions, yeah, there's more there to learn. But I don't think any of it's like inherently necessarily difficult to learn because like I mean, if I can figure it out, I'm pretty sure anybody could. There is a learning curve that will kick your ass in Axure for sure. And it's this one. So I've watched designers learn Axure. This happened to me when I learned it. People that I've trained to use it do this, where as you start to figure out all the cool things you can do to make something look real, your ability to not do those things when they're not needed bottoms out. And everybody who I've ever seen learn Axure has a little period of time where they just over-engineer the living shit out of every prototype for no reason. And I think this is also kind of a designer maturity thing. Like as you mature as a designer, you start to learn when it's more appropriate to use low fidelity assets versus high fidelity and when not to waste your time on this. But especially like a junior designing learning Axure, they are going to hit this trough real hard as they learn it. But you recover and eventually you learn that, you know, unless it's actually important for testing, no, I'm not going to build a mock database that populates this table because that would be ridiculous. But yeah, so that's kind of my whole spiel on Axure. Like if I have to give an elevator pitch for it, and the reason that I favor it is that if you're designing interactive things, it is a lot easier if you're using a tool whose output is interaction. But I'm also not interested in being a developer or having to learn code or, you know, end up with someone having to QA my work in order to do that. And Axure is the best tool I've ever found for, you know, being able to adequately test like complex interactions without having to actually learn code. So that's all I got. I have, it looks like, a minute and a half left. Does anyone have any questions?
Actually, if you don't mind, we did kind of reserve some time at the end, so if we could just open it up to general questions for each of our panelists. Yeah, we can just spend the rest of our time kind of digging in. It looks like there's been a lot of great chat going on as well. So. Looks like there's one in chat. Says, Andrew, can you let us know what are your favorite plugins for Figma?
Yeah, so let me jump into a file here. And so I'll just list off a couple that I use that I really enjoy. You know what I'll do? I'll just type them in the chat, I think, because there's a few that I really enjoy. Now, the one thing is, though, one thing that I did miss from Sketch when we made the transition over to Figma was there was this Sketch Runner plugin that was so cool that like it almost popped up similar to like in the Mac experience. It almost popped up that spotlight search where you could search across different symbols and things like that in Sketch. So there's something similar in Figma. It doesn't quite scratch the surface too much on that, but I'll list off a couple in the chat here actually, just because I think that'll be easier.
Feel free to turn on your video or audio if you want to just ask, or you can put in your questions in the chat as well.
I don't know if you went over it when I was talking. My mom came down here, but how exactly on Axure do you like make the text input field interactive like that?
I can actually.
Is it easy or is it like kind of complicated?
Yeah, so like here, I'll show you. So if I'm in Axure, basically, so I'm using an older version of Axure because reasons and corporate budgets, but basically what you have as your base elements are a lot of like the core HTML elements. So if I want to slap a text field in something, I just put in a text field and I can say, hey, how big is it? How, you know, how is it styled? I have all of my styling options and stuff over here. I can make it look like whatever I want, but then when I just hit this little preview guy and, you know, publish it out to my browser, it's going to behave exactly like a text input because that's what it is. Like you're effectively designing with, sorry, everybody can hang out and see my email. Here, I'll show you what it looks like when you publish it out. You're effectively designing with, you know, HTML elements. So it's all just out of the box interactive.
I think that's pretty cool. As I usually use Figma, so like I can't believe you can really do that. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it is deeply, it's like that's where you get that little trough of, oh shit, I can make everything look real. And it's like, no, you don't really have to actually. No, it's not worth it. But it is really fun when you first start, because I came into Axure from using Photoshop and with Invision, and it was really trippy. It was fun.
Thank you.
It looks like there was a question actually a while ago, and I think probably anybody on the panel could share on this. It's a question about whether your design system determines the padding on elements. I think I've got that right.
Yeah, I'll just pull up, let me pull up our components file from 8451. I'll give you guys a little bit of a peek into what we do. So basically like our components file, it basically, we run it off of a bunch of different styles, as I mentioned. So that was a lot of the colors and stuff you saw me pulling from, especially like how we have our surfaces and inks and edges and things like that defined. But in our components specifically, so let me just zoom in on the buttons piece down here. So this is kind of crazy. And so similar to what Sam was just talking about, there's you know, it's like this does simplify it, but it doesn't get to like the interactive fields and stuff that she was kind of showing there, which I really loved seeing that about Axure. But basically, so with these button components, actually, these are all variants a part of like one button. And so basically the way we have it set up is we have different like properties, so like size, type, and state, so that when I add a button right up above here, it's actually taking all those size constraints. So if I search button and I just drop it into this file, which actually it's probably snapped right up here. So let me drag it out of it. If I drop in this instance of this button, we can actually change these sizes really quickly, which is awesome. And I love that. That's the variance feature in Figma. And then as far as spacing goes, we do have auto layout that's actually driving that. So if this is an instance of a button, if I kind of click into this here, you can see that, let me just pull this up here. It's got basically predefined settings on this that we've kind of defined, and we've actually mirrored in code as well. So that's kind of how we do it here.
And I'll share my screen just to give the similar but slightly different version of sketches with that. So, and I'll show with the button as well, just for sanity. So here, different, you can tell this is a primary, default, normal, not disabled type, not hover, just default state of that. If I hit option, you can see that the left and the right have 16 padding. So if I use an instance of this button, take me a second. This is my fault for organizing it so chaotically, like that's on me. But if I change what the button says, it will grow with it. So it really is how it's built. If I decide, oh, I want it to be here, then the instance of it updates to that. Sketch now also has a minimum width. So if I say, okay, I want them in width of 100, and then this says, hi, then it protects from that. So there's a little bit of smartness in there, but not the same layout situation that Andrew was showing. If I wanted it pinned to specific edge or like not resizing, I could change this pin to edge and fix size. That's similar, but a little different from Figma's.
Awesome. I think we've got time for a couple more questions.
Oh, I see a question in the chat about, do you have a grid setting you tend to prefer or a multiplier? 8, favorite number. I love 8. So earlier we were thinking in terms of 10, 20s, 40s, and I was like, guys, can we just do 8, 20, you know, font size 16, line height 1.5 of that, 24, 8 all around, 24 spacing, 32, 40, 8, everything. Friends with 8 is a friend of mine. So
It looks like someone asked, what is one function another application has that you wish was present in yours? Invision rocks, so none of it. Just kidding. I really like for both Figma and Azure, like it mimics the code so much, so you can actually visualize the different like micro interactions and animations and transitions. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult with like Sketch and Invision to get like the detail that I want. So I kind of have to just know and then the developers develop it and I'm like, that's close but not. So it would be nice to have something like that where it would cut that down a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that the tool that like I will still use Sketch for, like, outside of Axure. The stuff that really helps is some of the auto layout stuff, and I think it's similar in Figma. I mean, granted, I'm still using a pretty old version of Axure, so I don't know what they've updated recently, but you know, getting things sized and centered and padded correctly is a little bit more tedious in Axure than I would like, and if you're doing enough of it, it's kind of a pain. But yeah, I would love to see them pick that up.
Okay, let's wrap up with one more. And I guess this would go for all of you. Which tool is the best for UX designer and developer collaboration?
Good communication skills. I don't know.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is, like, I feel like they all can be used in different ways. It's just about, like, you can have a real-time conversation with the developer, or, you know, it's like you might need that to happen asynchronously, but there should always be a conversation. I don't think that these tools should ever take the place of that, and I'd love for other folks to chime in as well. But yeah, I don't know if there's anyone that's like the best. Like, they each have their benefits and disadvantages for sure.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely accurate. Like, I have found that Axure, like, being able to prototype really highly realistic behavior sometimes helps, especially, like, you know, I have to do a lot of asynchronous communication with dev because I'm like, got them on different continents on completely opposite sides of the planet too, or just, you know, in Texas, and they get up later than I do. So having something that, you know, gets the behavior really literal is good, but that also has a drawback, because when you give them a mock-up that isn't like prototyped out to the nth degree, they get confused. So it's like, it comes down to, like, are you actually talking to each other and interacting throughout the process? So
Yeah, that's one thing I do miss about being in the office. I liked watching them actually code, because I will never claim to be a developer, but at least when I was able to look at their code, I would be like side by side, without them having to run like emulators that take up a ton of time to get running. I would be able to kind of start to bridge that gap in my own mind between, like, okay, when I say like primary blue, this is what the developer is actually saying. So I do kind of miss that, and we try to mitigate that through documentation, but it's not the same side by side.
So, well, thank you so much to all the panelists who spoke tonight. Some really great content. I can tell from the chat that a lot of engagement and enthusiasm for each of your product reviews. So I will mention that our next meetup is going to be on Wednesday, April the 21st, a bit later in time. We're going to start at 7. It'll run from 7 to 8. We are actually partnering up with AIGA on that event, and Justin Dower will be speaking. His topic is the essential fusion of culture and design, and I think it's going to be really fantastic. So hope that you all can join us again, and look out, or keep an eye out rather, for the link that I'll be posting on LinkedIn to the video. I'll share out presentations, and yep, I think that's it. And thank you all so much for joining tonight, and hope to see you soon.